Welcome to part 2 of our Build Week recap from the Growth ML team at Weights and Biases. My name is Alex Volkov. I'm an AI Evangelist with Weights and Biases. Everything here is beautifully branded. I'm very happy for the production team that helped set this up. And if you've tuned with us for the last live, we've talked about 3 projects that the Growth ML team in Weights and Biases did during this build week for GPTs, and this is the second part of it. If you haven't tuned in, this is the first time you tune in, definitely check this out. This is recorded, and we've talked with 3 awesome teams / creators about their projects and the insights they learned, and the whole purpose of this live stream is actually to surface the learnings that we did during this build week that we were tasked back in December, to surface the learnings, to surface the ideas, the techniques, the challenges, everything that will help other teams potentially watching this to build their own projects like this in their companies. And so this is part 2, and we have 3 more exciting projects and teams here from Weights and Biases. But before we get to that, I want to show you a quick video of ours that I'm very happy to show every time because it's awesome and new and cool, and basically sums up what Weights and Biases is in a very short few minutes. So let's watch that, and then we're going to talk with Morgan.
AI teams are all asking the same question. How can we better manage our model development workflow? The path to production is increasingly complex, and it can get chaotic keeping track of thousands of experiments and models. Messy spreadsheets and ad hoc notebooks aren't going to cut it. The best AI teams need a better solution and better tools. They need Weights and Biases, the AI developer platform, to unlock their productivity and achieve production ML at scale. Replace messy spreadsheets with an automated system of record for experiments. Communicate about model evaluation and collaboratively review results across the team. Clean up disorganized buckets of models with a unified registry. Automatically capture full model lineage, all the data and code used for training and testing. Seamlessly connect to compute to scale up training. And run large-scale sweeps efficiently to optimize models. Analyze the performance of large language models. And monitor LLM usage and costs with live, customizable dashboards. Get your team on the same page to bridge the gaps from ideation to production. Use Weights and Biases to build, manage, and deploy better models faster.
How cool is that video? I every time I show it, I like, yes, we did a great job on it. So hopefully you learned a little bit about what Weights and Biases do. And then now we're going to talk about Content Navigator. The slides will say Content Suggester, but I was told last minute, as live things happen, that the name has changed actually. So here we go, Content Suggester. And the team behind this is Derek and Morgan. So let me put Morgan up on stage. Hey, Morgan, how are you?
Hey.
Oh, there you are.
Doing good, Alex, thanks.
So I'm very excited to talk about this, and the way we've done this before, we're just gonna watch the video that you guys prepared and then walk through it, and hopefully I have the video prepared right here, and then let's watch it, and then I'll pause in the middle, and then we're just gonna
myself in Dark.
Sounds good.
Oh, let's start from
It's
scratch.
a content suggester bot created by myself in Dark. Often in Growth, we get requests from across the company on whether we have existing content to send to prospects, customers, or partners. These can come in a variety of forms, often from GTM looking for content to send to their prospects.
So I guess let's chat about this just like briefly, because I've definitely seen this on Slack since I joined. Many folks come to our team and like, hey, there's an incredible amount of content that we produce in our team that elsewhere, like the amplification team. Can you say like why we are the guys like who everybody asks for content, and how this will hopefully make us work a little bit less and do other things?
Yeah, for sure. So Growth started really through a mix of events in San Francisco, but also writing content for our blog to showcase weights and biases in different use cases, and also just to provide educational material. So generating that content has always been at the heart of what we do. More recently, we've expanded that to white papers and courses, as well as all the other webinars we do. And so the library of content we've generated is 4 years old and has grown kind of exponentially as the team has grown also. And as we try and touch different machine learning libraries, different use cases, different kind of customers, different industries, a lot of the knowledge of what we've developed either sits in our heads or can be searched through Google or through our blog search. But really the best thing is to ask an experienced MLE in growth. If we have a piece of content, you'll probably get the answer. So I'm hoping to remove that reliance on people's memories of what we produced through this bot.
I think also one interesting thing you said, that the amount of applications for weights and biases in different companies, the amount of different areas that we work on is so vast. It's really, really hard for one person, especially if they're fairly new, to even kind of remember what they could send. So let's keep watching and then see how we try to attack this problem.
Sounds good.
Currently, it relies on people in growth remembering what is being created. Sometimes, content can be 2 or 3 years old, so this is obviously a little bit unreliable. And so now you'll be able to ask a bot instead, who can then suggest content for you. So let's take a look at how that looks. So once we're in Slack, we can test the bot and see how it goes. The bot's name will change here. So here we have a request asking for content related to autonomous driving. We can see the bot's reply, and here we have multiple reports retrieved, as well as a one-line description of the report that is specific to the request in general. We also have another view of this request for debugging, where we can see a little bit more granularly what's going on. And so here we're actually retrieving our reports through the Onebot retrieval endpoint built by Bharat. And this is useful because it lets us leverage Onebot for multiple uses. Here we have the reasons given of why the bot thinks this content will be helpful, as well as the description before. We also show the score from the retriever to show how relevant the retrieved content is.
All right, so we ended watching the video, and I have a bunch of questions. The one interesting theme that folks who watched the previous live and now watching this as well is that we haven't yet talked with Bharat. Bharat is going to be next, but many of the projects we built, they kind of almost to an extent either get used by Onebot or rely on Onebot to some extent functionality. I find it very interesting because it's not that at this point we have one GPT thing that does one specific thing. We're already adding a chain of these assistants, and almost Onebot is almost like a team member. I want to say that we all rely on the AI team member. Could you talk about the retrieval part? What's an interesting challenge there? What did you notice that worked well or didn't work, or you had to work around in the how to phrase or how to maybe rephrase somebody's question?
Yeah, for sure. So initially, this relies on Onebot. It has the full knowledge base of all of our reports and examples and much more. One thing I found was that sometimes the retrieval using those chunks in Onebot wasn't the best, because it might match on a chunk that said this technique applies to finance, and you might be looking for content to send to a prospect or a customer working in finance, and so that chunk would be retrieved. But actually, the broader report around that chunk wasn't specifically finance related, and so what I had to do was generate summaries of all of our reports, and then the plan is to then retrieve against those summaries, because that should capture the broader essence, keywords and entities in those reports, and should be better targeted, I think, to the use case that the content navigator is for, which is suggesting relevant content typically about use cases or industries. So it's a little bit different to Onebot, because Onebot, can just run with a snippet of like a few hundred tokens, or a bit of text or a bit of code, and then incorporate that into its answer. Whereas in this case, we're more trying to suggest the full bit of content that's being surfaced, and most of that bit of content needs to be relevant to the query.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about just the tech for folks who are watching us and maybe have built this, maybe are interested, like in 2024, or I guess end of 2023, 2024, what type of tech like does Weights and Biases choose for this, embedding wise, storage wise? Could you walk me through a little bit of those?
Sure. Onebot is just uses the FICE index. I'm hesitant to rely on too many hosted services, and our index isn't so huge that we really need a hosted service, I feel. So yeah, we just use FICE for our index. We use Llama index for the retrieval. Our embeddings are currently the V2 embeddings, but we're shortly going to upgrade those to the V2 OpenAI embeddings. We're going to upgrade those to potentially V3, although we're going to do a whole bunch of evaluations on some other embedding providers too, including Cohere and maybe Nomics.
There's so many from yesterday. There's Nomics, there's GTE, M3. There's a bunch of very interesting things for us to test, and also to showcase the test. Like, this is what we do, right? So let's talk about kind of evaluation. We're gonna get to like Onebot evaluation, I guess. How did you test? Was it just vibes bases? Have you run like beta testers? Like, how do you know that this is doing the job it needs to do?
Yeah, this project is early, so this is definitely still in the vibes phase. Just me looking at a lot of the reports and content that gets retrieved. We are going to be working with folks in our sales team, because this is also something that they've been thinking about a lot of like how to quickly get the right content to to our sales folks. So yeah, we're partnering with sales this quarter to expand this out and to like get some actual like feedback from users. I think that's the best way to evaluate this.
Absolutely. Morgan, one thing that I was reminded from folks backstage that I skipped, because this is live and we sometimes forget, I didn't ask you for an introduction. So please introduce yourself at the end of what you're saying, including maybe how long have you been with Weights and Biases, what's your position, and primary focus, I guess.
Sure. Morgan, I have been in Weights and Biases 3 years now. I now lead our ML team within Growth. Like I mentioned, Growth covers events, the blog, courses, code integrations, code examples, and a whole lot more of internal GPT tools. So a bit of a broad focus in the team, but having fun.
That's incredible. And but by the way, speaking of courses, like I would be remiss if I don't plug in the courses platform that we have, Oneb Academy. It's really easy. It's just oneb.courses. It should be down below here. And all right, Morgan, thank you so much for coming up and setting up this build week. Obviously, like setting aside some time for this like big team that needs to do a bunch of OKRs is not a simple thing, but I think it's very important. I think it's important to surface the learnings that we did, which is what we're doing here, and keep iterating on those projects internally such that we'll learn kind of the techniques as well. Like, for example, we talked about the embeddings. There's a bunch of embeddings that were just released that some friends of ours, like Weights and Biases, like Nomic, friends of Weights and Biases, for example, they just released like a fully open source end-to-end embedding. It would be very, very cool to test, and evaluating and recording is something we're going to talk in the next segment with Bharat. Definitely a strong suit of ours. So if you folks are building anything, keep watching, and we're going to chat about evaluations. Morgan, thank you so much. And then we're going to chat with Bharat next. So let me just present the slide. All right. And I want to say welcome to Bharat. Hey, Bharat, how are you?
Hey, Alex. I'm good. How are you?
You're next. Thank you for joining us to this live stream. So, Onebot is mentioned in every conversation that I had so far, from every project that I had so far, and you're the guy behind Onebot. So, first of all, let's start with introduction. The same thing. How long have you been here? What is your main focus? Are you doing anything else besides Onebot? And then where are you from, maybe, and then we're going to talk about the actual projects.
Okay, So I think I joined Weights and Biases about 18, 19 months ago. And I come from NLP and information retrieval background. So most of my past experience has been in that. And since I joined, I was initially largely taking care of integrations. So like the Hugging Face Transformers integration, PyTorch Lightning integration, um, and like the OpenAI integration. So all of these were are built and maintained by me. Um, and yeah, and then towards February last year, I started working on Onebot as a Hack Week, as the first Hack Week project that I was in this company for me. So yeah, that's when I kind of started working on Onebot and retrieval augmented generation in
All
general.
right. Last thing I want to say. It looks dark outside. Where are you dialing in from? Where in the world are you?
India.
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 Okay.
Yeah.
Right. So moving on to Onebot. For this build week, you made upgrades. The previous one, that's when it started. Let's talk about Onebot as an entity. Everybody keeps mentioning this. What is it? What is it for? What does it do? And then we'll talk about the tech as well.
Right. So I think it was initially conceptualized as, hey, can we do something with our documentation? Like searching through our documentation is so difficult sometimes, and can we do something that can bring value to users in terms of being able to do like answer queries in a more natural language way? And that's when I think GPT 3.5 had released back in February, and I was like, oh, let's just try to build a RAG system. There was still I was working with LangChain and Llama Index and helping build their weights and biases integration as well at that time. So it was a nice exercise for me to build the first RAG bot back about almost a year ago now. And yeah, and then over time, I think it has evolved quite a bit, and it has changed to now. I think when I think of Onebot, I think of it as uh, a colleague, like a conversational assistant, not just for the users, but also for people who are onboarded onto Weights and Biases. Your first week in Weights and Biases, you are asked to do a project, and you will have so many questions, and it's so easy today to go ask Onebot many of these questions. And that, I think, that vision is building and has come out pretty well in all this time. Yeah.
The thing that you mentioned definitely came through to the previous conversations and here, because literally almost every project, I think, besides just the one, or we'll see, relied on Onebot to some extent, either to help or to actually be behind the scenes as another content suggester. And I definitely feel that we're stepping into an area where we're going to have AI kind of teammates, and Onebot is a first example of this. So very, very happy to see this. Let's watch the video of the updates. I know for a fact that I watched a bunch of the videos, and you struggled because you had so much that you've added that you struggled to fit into the very short time. So hopefully we'll have some time for you. Here, let's watch the video together, and then let's see what's up.
Project. I worked on Onebot.
Right.
Hi everyone. For my GPT Hack Week project, I worked on Onebot 1.1 improvements. This includes a set of enhancements and a new auto evaluation framework. The first set of enhancements that I worked on was to improve the knowledge base. In addition to weights and biases documentation and examples, we now ingest fully connected reports, weights and biases test cases, and weave examples into our knowledge base.
So let's run through this, and apologies for the bad subtitles, bad AI. That's on me. I will have to fix this. So let's talk what happened before and what happens now. The data ingestion is. Can you talk about that pipeline real quick? What does it mean, the data ingestion?
So Onebot initially was conceptualized as just a documentation bot. So people could ask queries that they would search on our documentation website to Onebot in natural language. And at that point, we had just ingested everything that was there on our documentation website. So all the different pages and things like that. And that involved some amount of parsing that web content and removing we also have images and videos and things like that. So there is no multimodality in Onebot right now. But yeah, so initially that involved parsing the documentation. And we also found that, we have these example collab notebooks, and we had these example Python scripts that were really useful in terms of being able to answer certain queries. So those were the initial, before v1.1, Onebot just included the documentation and the examples.
And by included, you mean are they embedded in this
Right.
vector database? Yeah.
Yeah. So that involves, the ingestion pipeline involves taking the document, parsing it, chunking it, just keeping the most important content and enhancing it with a little bit of metadata so that we can then use that metadata for different filtering and other stuff. So that's what was there previously. And then what we did was we also added ways to parse our fully connected reports, our weights and biases test cases from the SDK, and not just weights and biases, because test cases sort of help GPT-4 or any language model to be able to talk about how to do certain things in terms of use case. Because and similarly, we also added Weave examples, Weave, which is our new library coming up, and we saw some questions. And the main idea behind adding these new data sources was, in addition to supporting other other bots that we had. For instance, the content suggester needed data from fully connected reports. And we also saw in a previous evaluation cycle that many questions could not be answered because we did not have that context. We were not able to answer Weave questions correctly because we did not have enough documents on Weave or whatever, right? So that's why that's why we sort of went ahead. I sort of went ahead and added some more data sources in this.
Are there also, I really wanted to ask this, are there also auto updating? So Fully Connected is our blog. We have a bunch of content there, but it's always evolving. So is there a process that keeps updating the information, the database for Onebot?
Yes. So every time we run an ingestion, we also create an ingestion report that talks about, hey, if you take GitHub repositories, right? Like the examples repository or Weave examples repository, they have we actually log the commit ID into a weights and biases report, and we keep track of, hey, did the commit ID actually change from the last time we ran the ingestion? And if it did, it it takes the difference number of documents and updates it. The same thing happens with our documentation website, because that also keeps getting updated with changes, and as we add new features or when we find some bugs in our documentation, we go and change things there. And each time that happens, we sort of run the ingestion pipeline and update the difference documents in terms of chunks and nodes. And the same thing with Fully Connected, in the sense that we use a BigQuery query to pull reports that have not been updated since the last time we pulled from Fully Connected. So all of this is you run an ingestion CLI command, and you get a nice weights and biases report in the end with weights and biases artifacts that says, hey, here are raw documents. These were the number of documents that were ingested. Here are the number of chunks, total number of vectors. Here's the size of the vector store. And you also end up with a weights and biases report that you can share with people.
I think it's very interesting to highlight here, just to stop and highlight, for example, that folks who build a demo chat with documents demo, there's a bunch of them, or a RAG demo, they don't necessarily think about, okay, how do I actually make the bot up to date, right? So it's we know about the cutoff time in GPT is that when they release a big new model that has a different cutoff time, and the model knows things up until that date. So ingestion pipeline is very interesting. I don't think that many people consider this as the next thing. Definitely folks should consider that your bot shouldn't be kind of only knowing about a certain point in history. It should get updated. So ingestion pipeline. Let's move on and see what else you've added here. A bunch of goodies.
Cases and Weave examples into our knowledge base. Next, we added a new query enhancer module that performs language detection, intent classification, keyword extraction, and subquery enhancements to a user query. Then we improved the user query.
So let's run through this real quick. Cohere, what do you use Cohere for? And also Instructor, let's cover Instructor for just a second afterwards.
Right. Cohere, because we we actually have a set of users in our Japanese language Slack. So we need to be able to identify users when identify queries in Japanese language, because we also have documentation in Japanese language. So, and I think when Thomas comes up next, he will present his document translation bot, which can translate documentation into multiple languages. And language detection essentially helps in understanding what language a query is in, and then instructing GPT further to be able to say, hey, the query is in like Japanese.
Yep.
Here are documents in Japanese. Answer in Japanese and not in English, right? And then we also use Cohere for like intent classification. So for this, I had to create like a curated data set of about 100. I took about 100 queries and said, hey, this query is related to weights and biases features, and this query is related to some code debugging problem. This query is related to sales and GTM. So this gives or this query is related to best practices, or this query is not related to weights and biases. This query is asking for an opinion, or here's a query that is nefarious in nature. So all of this is much, while GPT can itself, like in some ways, be able to identify these, it's much more easier to have like a classifier that says, hey, here are here's the deterministic, way of saying what type of query this is, and we just choose a multi-label classifier here and fine-tune like a small Cohere model to do that. So you can see like some
fine-tuned classifier model for incoming requests in this. Oh wow, okay, this gets complex.
Right.
I want to move to instructor just super quick. I will shout out that we have a new course from the author from the instructor library, Jason Liu. And if you want to check out what instructor does, please check out our courses. What do you use instructor for here?
So yeah, in addition to simple vector search, we also have like a keyword based search. So in order to be able to do that, we should be able to like extract some keywords from a query. And some queries have multiple subqueries in them, like complex queries in them, right? So we break down complex queries and use like instructor, essentially a beautiful library, very small wrapper around OpenAI to say, hey, here's a user query. Can you tell me, what keywords I should be looking for in my keyword index? And can you also give me a list of subqueries that I can, in addition to the existing query, search for, so that I have like enough context to be able to answer the user.
That's awesome. Let's keep moving because we have a bunch more to cover.
Query. Then we improve the retrieval module to include a new hybrid retrieval that uses keywords, similarity search, and web-based results from u.com API, and finally re-ranks all of these results using Cohere re-ranking.
So the hybrid thing is incredible. Many people build like a rag bot and it's only a vector search with the like similarity, cosine similarity retrieval, basically. Some people go one step further and say, hey, let's do re-ranking on whatever results we get, right, etc. Hybrid is actually both. It's also like you just said, like it's a keyword search because sometimes there's a keyword. So you're actually extracting those keywords. Sorry, you're extracting, not instructing. You're extracting those keywords with instructor. It's confusing. And then also a hybrid search through a regular database. Like what's sitting behind this? Like how do you pull the keywords?
It's a BM25, BM25 by rank BM25. It's a library that allows you to do keyword search on like text. So yeah, essentially whatever documents we store in the retriever, we maintain a separate keyword index for those documents, and then we just use, and that's like, I think that used to be what Elasticsearch used to rely on BM25 retrieval, but this is more like because of the size, we don't really need Elasticsearch, so we just use like a small library to do that. And one additional thing that we added was u.com retrieval, which provides answers from Stack Overflow and GitHub issues and things like that in terms of like web results for queries.
Yeah, web results is like very interesting as well because the web is vast and not necessarily the answers there are correct. So we know from our documentation that this is the state of the art. So definitely I wanted to talk about evaluations at some of this point.
Finally, we included a new retrieval endpoint that can be used by our OneDB GPT as its source for responses to user queries. for responses to user queries.
I want to shout this out. This Onebot GPT thing, we launched it as the custom GPT store in OpenAI launched, and it's super cool because now Onebot kind of this entity that lives on Slack, correct? It lives in Discord, and now everybody who pays for GPT can actually like access Onebot through the GPT store, and it uses the same kind of brain behind everything as well, right? It's super cool. It's super watching.
The main goal of auto evaluation was to align GPT-4 evaluations with manual annotations that we had conducted in a previous iteration. We measured model performance on various dimensions, including answer relevancy, faithfulness, and correctness. Here, you can see an example of our first model, which was GPT 3.5 Turbo, with low answer relevancy, faithfulness, and correctness. With each new model, we sort of improved upon the performance, and the new 1.1 pipeline has considerable performance in terms of answer relevancy, faithfulness, and correctness. So how did all of this affect our latency? Well, we are happy to share that the new pipeline is in fact much faster than earlier versions.
So pausing before latency, I think this last thing that I want to chat before we hop over to Thomas, because we're coming up on some time. Evaluation and continuous evaluation of how this thing performs, I think, is also another big piece that people don't necessarily have time to have the knowledge to know how to do. Let's walk through like how like auto evaluation even works. Like, how do you know that answer relevancy is higher in the next version? How do you know that like context recall is better? Let's talk about like how do we do evaluations. I think it's a good information to share with people.
Yeah. So I think before we even started doing auto evaluation, the first thing that we had to have in place was a manual set of annotations in terms of, hey, here's a question, here's like the exact correct answer to that question. And to do that, we in a previous iteration, like a couple of months back, we actually sat down, all of us MLEs, and annotated about 100 questions from that people had asked Onebot on Slack, our internal Slack. And from that set, and Ayush did some really amazing work on that manual effort in terms of building that data set. But then what we realized is when we were running existing evaluations from libraries like Ragas or even Llama Index, it was not aligning. Like if Raga said something was relevant and our manual annotation said it was not relevant, or it had certain issues with it. For instance, Raga said, hey, this query does not, it's not answering what is there in terms of the context provided. But then as a user, we know that, the context, it was in fact present, and the query indeed did answer what was, present in the context. And we were able to like say, hey, this is, aligned. So that's where, the first thing that we did in terms of auto evaluation was take a GPT-4 model and, create some system prompts and like align it with our existing, manual annotations. So we provide GPT-4 with the question, the context, the answer from Onebot, and a gold standard answer. And we say, hey, here are all the things. Now, can you tell me if the answer is relevant when compared to the gold standard answer? And if not, to do that, we use instructor again and say, hey, first tell me the reason as to why this is relevant, and then tell me whether it is relevant or not relevant. And that way, that's like, it sort of enforces this chain of thought process and makes the model like provide with. And we've also found the same thing that I think recently came up, which is we did not evaluate on scores. Like we did not say, hey, score 1, 2, 3, 4. The scores that you see here are actually normalized versions of actual labels. So it says relevant with some mistakes, or not relevant, right? In a similar way, factfulness. Is GPT-4 hallucinating some part of the answer? Is it adding some methods in the code that it's not supposed to have? So that's what we call answer faithfulness here, but it's essentially checking the generated answer against the actual gold standard answer as well as the context, and saying, hey, there is something in this answer that is not present in the context, and it highlights that. And then answer correctness is just like measuring if we are able to exactly answer the user's query. So it is a measure of how correct is the answer in terms of that query, and is it deviating from whatever the user had requested.
That's
So yeah.
that's quite an elaborate setup for evaluations, and I want to highlight like this thing where we're also using AI to evaluate kind of the answers from another AI. I think it's awesome, and honestly, now thinking about this, before I chatted with you, when we talked about other projects used Onebot. So in my head, there was like, okay, we're building an AI project that uses like another AI, like teammate or whatever. So now you're saying this AI teammate has an AI project manager that makes sure that it does its job correctly and always like evaluates them on OKRs. Okay, so that's great to know. Okay, so let's talk about latency. I think this is the biggest piece. You also, obviously, throughout this project, we're doing like a larger recap because we're not only focusing on what you did for Build Week, because we obviously want to know about Onebot. Latency is a big thing. I know that I used our bot, for example, from the GPT, and sometimes latency was higher. Let's talk about like how this
Faithfulness
improved,
and
and then we'll
correctness.
skip to Thomas.
So how did all of this affect our latency? Well, we are happy to share that the new pipeline is in fact much faster than earlier versions that we had in terms of performing models.
So
Thank
here
you.
we can see a plot. I assume that this is our internal place, measuring latency in the newer ones. But I don't want to ask you like this final question, like super quick. First of all, this is incredible, dude. This is like really like top of the line RAG system, including evaluations, ingestion pipeline. This is something that people need to know that exists. For folks who are watching this, if you haven't tried Onebot, you can go on our Discord and check it out. You can go to GPTs as well and check it out. And please give us feedback as well, what works for you, for what doesn't. So we'll incorporate this feedback. Bharat, what else? Like what's missing in Onebot? What else do we want to add? Like what's your next like big thing that has to be there?
I think now that we have auto evaluation present, we are actually trying to make it as reliable as possible so that our customer success team can start relying on Onebot and make their life easier. The other big thing is to be able to add Onebot directly into our documentations website so that when people go there to do that search. I think nowadays you might see Mendable and few other companies like
Yep.
adding search icons where you can go search for stuff in natural language. So that's another big thing. And all of this involves improving reliability, reducing latency, and making things like as fast as possible while still maintaining a high level of accuracy. And it involves a lot of work in terms of the information retrieval side than in terms of trying to get a language model to get the answer correct, because I think we've sort of fine-tuned the system prompt over the last year in such a way that now it's pretty good. But we also have set up guardrails, which was what you saw in terms of that query enhancer. And finally, we have auto evaluation. So we have incoming guardrail, outgoing guardrail, and we've added some more sources of data. We intend to support GTM team and a few other teams. And then the next step is to make Onebot more autonomous. So instead of just being able to query Onebot, to be able to say, hey, can you tell me what are my top runs in this project, or the best run, the run with the most accuracy? What hyperparameters did I use for my run in so and so, project? And that's like the next autonomous stage that we want to achieve with Onebot.
All right, so Onebot gets an upgrade next iteration into a full-blown agent. That's what I hear. And the second thing I hear is now that all these guardrails and systems are in place, like auto evaluation and ingestion pipeline, it's fairly easy for us to try out new things because there's a bunch of stuff in this pipeline that are new potentially, right? We can switch out the vector store, for example, from Feist to Chroma or Weaviate or whatever, and then see if it's faster for us. We can change the embeddings, like the new embeddings that just released, and see if they're like higher quality, if dimensionality is improving the score, for example. There's like a bunch of stuff that we can do. And because of this like auto evaluation stuff that we can currently keep running, and because we have users already, we're able to now evaluate like different things in production, which I think is a big problem for this whole area of things where people just read something and then they kind of like trust the vibes or what their users say. Bharat, thank you very much. This has been great. Folks should definitely check out Onebot on our Discords and in the GPT store, and give us a shout out if something doesn't work for you. We would definitely wanna learn about this as well. Thank you, man. And then we're gonna finish on a high note with the translation, something that near to my heart. Thank you, Brad. Because I believe that language barriers should not exist, and I believe that Thomas, you believe this as well. I think. Hi, welcome to the stage, Thomas.
Hello,
How are you?
Alex. Good, thanks.
So let's start with the introduction. Your title here says Llama Surgeon. I definitely want to hear what's that about. But let's first of all introduce yourself. Where you're from? Why do you have an accent? And how long have you been here?
Yeah, I'm Thomas. I work at Weights and Biases. I'm an MLE on Morgan's team. I've been working here for 2 years now, and I do all kind of stuff. I mostly join doing computer vision and have pivot to LLMs, of course, because everyone's doing that and it's fun. So yeah, my title Llama Surgeon is because I'm actually trying to train smaller llamas and mistrals by chopping some layers. And we're trying to create something fun with the community. And you will need to wait a little bit to hear more about that. But
so experiments are happening and surgeoning is happening. So I would love to just start watching what you've built, what you worked on, and then let's run through the project.
Let's do that.
All right, let's start.
Let me show you my project about how to use ChatGPT to translate the documentation automatically. This repo represents a documentation repository with a docs folder. We have a configuration folder where we can specify how to instrument our model with the human model, the human prompt, the system prompt, and the model configuration. We can also pass a specific dictionary with a list of words and how to translate them to have consistency across documents.
So let's pause here just super quick. This is a problem that I think many developer-facing companies, many the documentation-based companies, they face. First of all, updating your documentation is extremely important as you move up your SDK. But second of all, we specifically, and I think Bharat mentioned this as well, we specifically have a big Japan presence, Asia presence. Specifically for Japan, we have a bunch of stuff. So I quickly noticed here you have two examples here, Spanish and Japanese. And then also Bharat mentioned that we already have a classifier that understands in Onebot what language folks ask. How are these done right now? How are our translations done? Are they done well? Why did you choose this as a category problem to solve?
Okay, let's go back a little bit. Yeah, we have a website with our documentation for all the Weights and Biases ecosystem that it's in English. So that's manually done by our documentations team. Everyone helps a little bit. It's just a Git repo that we try to keep up to date. It's always hard having high quality documentation. So of course, if you are also having a mirror documentation website that it's translated to another language, that thing is gonna fall behind. You will update something because the SDK or some of your tools change, and you will need to cascade to the other languages that are being powering your documentation. So as you mentioned, we have Japanese here because the Japanese community, they actually consume a lot of content in their own language. I'm from Chile, but I live in France, and I'm used to consuming English content. So I most of the time will search for the English version of everything. I will assume that if I'm going to search for PyTorch or any ML-related content, the default will be English. But I think many countries are trying to consume on their own languages. And for pedagogical point of views, if you go to the university in France or in Chile, they will teach ML in Spanish or French or their own language. So, and we have a lot of users using Weights and Biases at school level, like a master or even, I will say, undergrad. So having content in their language is probably really useful. And Japanese especially, and now Korean is coming. They consume a lot in their own language, and you can see that you have GitHub issues written in Japanese, and they tend to stick to their language, and I think that's powerful.
Yeah. So the big problem here is
Japanese is there.
We have, I want to say, more than 800,000 practitioners using Weights and Biases from all over the world. And many of them, maybe English is their second, maybe some of them is a third language as well. I definitely agree with the point that you said. I tend to go to the English one because I assume that that's the most up to date. And I think in most cases this assumption is correct. And probably the reason why is because human translation is hard, it's expensive. And now we have these tools, they're able to translate, but it's not as simple as that, as we're going to chat about as well. So let's keep watching, and then let's talk about the challenges here.
We can also pass a specific dictionary with a list of words and how to translate them.
So like this is an example of why it's not super easy, right? So there are specific things that may be translated by a standard like previous era, let's say, translator, like a Google Translate, for example. They will be translated just literally, and sometimes that's not what we want. In addition, there's a specific terms of ours in weights and biases, for example, all machine learning terms, right? So you had to build like an additional kind of translator guidebook. Can you talk about this a little bit?
Yeah, like we started translating naively, like a system prompt was like, hey, translate this to English, try not to break Markdown or whatever format you're using for your webpage. And that produced pretty good results, but we quickly realized that we have no consistency of technical words of the weights and biases product or even machine learning. And so, yeah, we had to add manually, like, hey, when you see this word translated, always like this. So, because we translate by chunks, so it will maybe translate on the first paragraph, I don't know, machine learning, like to the Spanish or whatever, and then in the next paragraph, it will translate the same word differently. These models have randomness built in, like temperature, that you can play and you can limit that scope, but not that much. So yeah, we started adding them manually, and like as we found more, we add more, and then we constructed one from English to Japanese. And then when I wanted to play with Spanish, I was like, oh, I don't even know the translation of most of these words. So I just asked on Twitter. A lot of my friends in Spanish that work on this domain helped me out. A lot of words are not translated, like people actually use the English term.
I want to highlight a specific problem here. Hugging Face Transformer. We in this industry, we know Hugging Face. Like to us, like it's okay. Hugging Face is a company. The translator itself may not know that this is a company. It will literally translate hugging and face into a different language. Would not make sense in documentation, right? So like this is like a good example of failure cases that potentially a human translator with a focus on this domain would likely be able to like catch, but we have to like keep catching this. Any other funny examples like this? I think you mentioned
weights and biases. Weights and biases is bad.
Yeah.
Like it's an actual technical term on statistics. So yeah, if you are talking about machine learning and you put the weights and biases phrase in there, it will think it's, oh, you're talking about maybe the weights and biases of your neural network or whatever. So it will maybe translate that to to Spanish or the language you were trying. So you need to make sure that every occurrence of that word keeps saying weights and biases, because that's the company name.
So how do you actually technically do this? Is that like a system prompt that you shove all of this and like you guide the prompt? Like how is this happening?
Yeah, you can see like there's multiple files here. Like we have a system prompt that have some args, and this is baked into the system prompt. You will read the dictionary, so it's like a basic system prompt that works more or less for multilingual, and then it will ingest and copy paste that dictionary on the system prompt. So like basically, hey, you have this dictionary and be consistent. You always translate them like the dictionary.
I think
we have a pretty big system prompt.
Yeah, so this is the point I want to touch on, because in the Thursday AI podcast that I run, we always kind of talk about the duality between, okay, a better rack system will probably get you like what you want, but these models lately get more and more context windows. So Code Llama, for example, just released from Meta, and that came out with like a 16K context window, which is like now large. But we know that like throughout the 2023, the context windows were very small, and now they're growing longer, which creates other problems in terms of how these models perform. But not necessarily you would want to use all of it for like full documents of text, but the system prompts that we send are now getting like very complex. Like it's a whole, like Bharat was just mentioning that like we fine-tune our system prompt for Onebot, for example, for this use case and that use case. That context length has to accommodate for like larger and larger ones, especially in this case.
I can say a little bit about that because that was super painful at the beginning, because this project started when GPT-4 was released. GPT 3.5 was not good enough for translating web pages and documentation and having like good prose and But when GPT-4 came out, we're this tool is completely capable of doing this, and it produces pretty high quality translations. But GPT-4 was time out. Like
Slow.
even if they sell you 8K context window, if you send more than 1K, it will just die. That was back then. Now it's better. It's still not yet there. You cannot at all use the full context windows of GPT-4. At least I haven't been able, like, consistently. Some of the requests will time out. Depends on how loaded the model is. So actually what we do under the hood is we chunk the document and we just translate by paragraph, and coming up with a good like chunking that preserves structure and doesn't break code snippets, and it's kind of consistent on chunk side. I had to build that manually actually to be able to do that. So
let's talk
as
about,
you said, the context length is something you have to pay attention a lot.
And so we definitely know that like paying attention to this is important, but also more and more, it looks like more and more complex use cases, complex system prompts, like for example here where you have like the whole dictionary of how we want to make sure to translate this, are possible now because of the longer context window. GPT-4, when you talked with GPT-3 that you said, that was like 4,000 context window, 4,000 tokens. Now GPT-4 Turbo, I think, is 128, and GPT-3 is like 16 or something. So it's not like that you can like send all this because timeouts, but definitely there's more place to play around with like more complex things.
For sure.
Yeah, so
like,
great.
but
So
this project is sending 1,000 tokens at a time, no more than that.
Okay. Yeah, that's
pretty short.
Pretty short, but also another thing to consider for folks who are building this and listening to this, latency. So we've talked with multiple projects here. Some of them are Slack bots, for example, like Onebot and the other bots that we had. This one is not necessarily a bot per se, right? This is like a async process that starts. So let's watch how it works and then talk about the difference, because for some places, maybe a longer, more high quality result could be better because it's not like user interactive. So let's talk about this.
When you create a PR that has change on the documentation, for instance, this is changing one file, and you merge that PR to main, that action will trigger. So once it's merged, it will launch a GitHub action that will start translating what was merged on that PR.
Just a brief technical like intro for folks who are watching and not like using GitHub for their own. Pull request is the way to add your code to somebody else's code or your own code just to annotate. And GitHub Actions is this like automatic CI/CD continuous deployment process that GitHub lets you build code within to start automatic processes. So you've orchestrated the translation on top of this automation kind of feature of GitHub, correct?
Yeah, the documentation websites, most of them live on a Git managed repository, so it's really useful to have it there.
Yeah, and this is like what orchestrates like when you call which API and starts like processes as well.
Yeah, the only thing that is here is that we paste our OpenAI API key, so the computer that's running on GitHub is capable of making requests to OpenAI. That's the only thing. API
so
wise.
everything lives in there, so you don't host it separately anywhere. It's just like
not
launches
at all.
and runs. That's incredible. Like we don't even have to like host it. I think GitHub gives us.
No, this is the free runner. It's pretty basic, but it's enough. Like this is just waiting for requests from OpenAI.
So another highlight here, folks. If you want like stuff for free, GitHub gives a lot of stuff for free. One of them is the actual GitHub Actions has a free runner, which is like the Linux basic whatever. You can run Python code, probably JavaScript as well, and you can fairly quickly automate some stuff through GitHub entirely for free without like managing.
Fairly quickly, it's a stretch, but it's probably
or
the most painful
on
development
Twitter
environment.
All right, let's keep seeing what we have here.
Once the action has finished, it will propose a new PR referencing the PR that created this action. It will propose the documentation translated to the desired language, and you can actually...
So I want to see here. So this is in a different language. This looks...
Spanish,
right? Spanish. So this actually like proposes a full markdown document that's translated just to Spanish. And I want to just like highlight this one thing. I've been into translation. I've built a translation startup myself. Many of the people who use these tools, they're not translators themselves. The benefit they get is speed to translation, which is starting from a blank slate, watching English and then translating word by word. Like it's a pain. It's a long process. But even if you don't get to like a human level translation with these automatic tools, giving a person something to edit versus a complete blank slate for them to start running, like this is like 95% like shaving their time as well. Have you noticed this as well from what you've run and like the folks who are using our translations? Have they started like using this?
Yeah, we have like 2 stages here. Like imagine right now Weights and Biases is like English and Japanese, and tomorrow we're gonna deploy it Spanish. The first step would be like sequentially and translate all the website at once. So that gets you started with a translation that it is. Like it may not be perfect, but you of course can edit it. And if you host that in an open source fashion that people can request changes on your GitHub repo, even the community can help you out, like fix stuff. And once you have that working and you put this bot on your GitHub repo, it will incrementally be way easier, because probably you will change one page at a time, and you can ask someone like, and this before merging, you can ask to review here, and the GitHub interface gives you the review options, approve changes, whatever. So this is really useful. Like the translator can just check like, oh, this makes sense, just read it once. And we can go even further. You could ask GPT-4, hey, read this, does it make sense? Yeah. And maybe, I don't know, power with the Onebot just to check that the code is working.
Yeah, because we have a bunch of snippets of code. We definitely don't want to translate any of that as well. Let's see what else we have here.
Changes to the branch before merging. The library that powers this translation is GPT Translate, just a wrapper on OpenAI, and some strategies to chunk the Markdown files in a way that you can concatenate them back and have a working Markdown file. We'll make a GitHub action out of this package. This way we can use this tool in any repository that has documentation. Just need to pass the input parameters and you are good to go.
That's awesome. So this library lives on GitHub and you open sourced it, correct?
Yeah, the GPT Translate action, it's open source. It's actually a good exercise to, you have a Python script that takes some arguments and you can convert that to an action. An action is a piece of code that you can like use on any repo. So that was a good exercise, how to like configure the inputs and the outputs and just make that a shareable product.
That's awesome.
But Thomas, everything is pure Python, so like everyone that's on the ML field will be familiar with that.
So definitely, folks, go to the GPT Translate repo and check it out. It's on GitHub under T. Capelli. And then follow us for more stuff like this. I really enjoyed this live series that we did talking with you guys. I think Morgan just hopped off, but I want to add Brad back just super quick and say this has been like an awesome build week, but also the amount of insights that we generated, the amount of like techniques, challenges that other people will probably run into that I've been able to collect and hopefully give the community back was incredible. So just want to thank you guys for the incredible job you did during the build week and for joining us for these live stages. And to the audience, hopefully we'll do more of these, and let us know in the comments if this is helpful to you or any questions that you have. We'll post any links that we'll have. With that, I want to just like, again, super quick show you our cool and awesome video, and then we'll see you on the next live. Cheers, everyone.
AI teams are all asking the same question. How can we better manage our model development workflow? The path to production is increasingly complex, and it can get chaotic keeping track of thousands of experiments and models. Messy spreadsheets and ad hoc notebooks aren't going to cut it. The best AI teams need a better solution and better tools. They need Weights and Biases, the AI developer platform, to unlock their productivity and achieve production ML at scale. Replace messy spreadsheets with an automated system of record for experiments. Communicate about model evaluation and collaboratively review results across the team. Clean up disorganized buckets of models with a unified registry. Automatically capture full model lineage, all the data and code used for training and testing. Seamlessly connect to compute to scale up training. And run large-scale sweeps efficiently to optimize models. Analyze the performance of large language models. And monitor LLM usage and costs with live, customizable dashboards. Get your team on the same page to bridge the gaps from ideation to production. Use Weights and Biases to build, manage, and deploy better models faster.